milk of the north, grey gardens, burden of dreams, the sorrow and the pity. Paris is burning. F is for fake, the thin blue line. And last night in Sweden, one man's terrifying burning into the dark heart of an immigrant induced, crime-ridden, murder-infested, rodeo nightmare. The horror he endured would be etched from his soul for eternity.
So we're walking around Rosenberg. It's kind of boring. This really is considered to be, the poorest or worst place in Sweden. Wow. Sweden's doing pretty well. It's snowing. It's snowing a lot. I don't know what you expect to happen here. It's just a neighborhood. There's a lot of people who think that, you'll get robbed here, that there's a lot of sex crimes, things like that. That's not the case. They said that we'd get robbed if we came out here. No. What? There it is, yeah. They don't solve it.
Wow, that is just some really riveting stuff right there. And hey, it's the new year. And today, guys, we're going to talk a little bit more about Tim Pool's feature-length documentary, Last Night in Sweden, which tragically, much like Stanley Kubrick's Napoleon, Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune, and Tommy Wiseau's When Gary Glenn Moss, never saw the light of day. Yes, Tim's original intent was to produce a documentary according to his Kickstarter initial fundraising video, and gee, I just can't imagine why it never came to light. I mean, he uncovered so many shocking revelations about immigrant crime in Sweden.
Have you seen robberies or no? I mean, there was one 14-year-old that went to like a loud cracker, a firecracker.
Firecrackers, which of course are extremely deadly, as the rash of ISIS ass firecrackers in 2017 certainly taught us. Well, first of all, in the last video, which incidentally drew some unexpected praise from former coworkers and associates in Pool, that was interesting. So yeah, in that video, I promised you scandalous, never before seen footage that Tim Pool does not want you to see. And to be perfectly honest, that was a bit of a white lie. Ow! Oh! Fuck! Was that really necessary? Anyhow, well, actually, those were just highly embarrassing long-since deleted videos. But today, I had actual unreleased footage, the reels, as well as unaltered footage from his trip to Sweden that has never seen the light of the internet. I definitely think I know why. And by the way, you can't do a thing about it, Tim, because you never signed a contract. So yeah, we're going to talk about all of that. Several not very surprising, but in my opinion, highly unethical things that occurred behind the scenes within the series that until now have gone completely unknown. Now, these videos, which, if you don't know, are what truly launched his solo YouTube career as a journalist. I mean, the sudden jump in views kind of speaks for itself. Anyhow, we're going to talk about how this series of videos was kind of hijacked by one of the most right-wing journalists in all of Sweden, and how the broadcast of just one unseen interview could have completely dismantled not just the fear porn that Tim was desperately trying to inject into these videos, but what continue to be some of Tim's major talking points to this day. So I just don't know if I can emphasize enough that all this isn't just important because it sheds light on unknown egregious lies and examples of people practicing ethically bankrupt duty journalism, but it's literally the ethically bankrupt duty journalism that jump-started his career. So, why was Last Night in Sweden never made?
But, I don't know what you expect to happen here. There's just a bunch of people walking around with some old people shopping. If I were to compare this to Chicago, I would laugh.
It was boring. Oh my god, I hated watching it. It was also boring from the standpoint of drumming up anti-immigrant hysteria, so much so that Paul Joseph Watson had to just straight up make lies up about it like this.
There was a Lebanese shopkeeper in Malmo who is an immigrant himself. He wants to move back to Lebanon. You ever plan on going back to Lebanon?
You live there?
Yeah. Reading this letter? Or?
Yeah. So this time,
But fortunately for Tim, he did manage to have just one incident that was still, in my opinion, excruciatingly boring, yet somehow aided right-wing media outlets like the Daily Wire in making claims like,
but it turns out Sweden really has become a stinking cesspool of violence.
and that was Tim's video getting escorted out of Rickety. Let's take a look, shall we?
The police have just warned us that if we don't leave now and take this escort, it's going to get really bad really fast. They said 50 people could be here in minutes and they recognize us. We're masking up. We have to leave.
So local police did, in fact, go on to dispute Tim's claims at the event, and until now, I thought that the truth of what happened that day would forever be between Tim, the local police, and Sequel. But as it turns out, I have new behind-the-scenes facts to share on this event, so now I think it's time that we dig a little deeper. So, some quick updates as my premium patrons go across the screen. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that Cal was also an incendiary device. Feel bad. But anyhow, although this is technically a sequel to Two Cool Uplifts, The Lost in Pool Takes, this video can very much be enjoyed independently. The only info that I think we should reestablish is that Tim passed off an Alex Jones level batshit French political group with neo-Nazi ties in his Sweden series as just regular Swedish dudes concerned with immigration. I'm not exaggerating, it's actually far worse than it sounds. I also mentioned a study by the Institute of Global Affairs that shows how his videos aided a coordinated smear campaign led by the Swedish far right. And I since found an essay from the respected Brookings Institute, which cites Tim's videos specifically as materials that help Swedish far-right populist right-wing groups spread their rhetoric internationally. So keep that all in mind, because although sure, while this video can be viewed as some sort of big too cool thing, what we're really looking at here is both false narratives that people like Tim established in order to spread harmful far-right-wing messaging, as well as the dishonest links they go to in order to achieve it. So, back to Rickety. Tim's initial claims that we heard earlier of change and escalated rather quickly, changing the story he told here in 4 key ways and making the event sound far more threatening than it initially was. And here are those differences.
But in Stockholm and Rinkeby, they immediately start yelling at us.
That while receiving the escort,
as we were walking, there were people following us, yelling at us.
oh, and finally, the police had said that irate flash mob of 50 masked people who were presumably sprinted there at an astonishing speed weren't empty-handed. Well, I'll let Tim explain.
And the cop says, well, look, maybe if we arrest one person, there'll be 50 more people here with stones.
So now they were going to be armed with stones. Our CGI team whipped up this little recreation that thankfully never occurred. Now, Tim's uploading this footage at a certain point, just fast forward so you can't hear or see really anything that's going on. But I happen to have the unedited version, and well, the footage just does not line up with what he's saying. And here's something to keep in mind. Due to Tim's fast forwarding, you can't tell, but he actually attempts to summarize what had just occurred 3 more times. We can't play all of them, but here's one.
We have to get a police escort right now. We've been warned by them, and it'd be really dangerous if we don't leave right now.
A total of 4, and you'd think he'd mention just one of the 4 of these things at least once, as they would be important details, but he doesn't. And again, to be crystal clear, it's primarily the elements of Tim's story that alternative right-wing media sites will highlight it and sensationalize, which in turn massively raised out Tim's profile and that of the series. So it's extremely important that we just really drill down on these key points. So, claim number 1, they were being followed. Watching this at normal speed, I'm just not seeing anyone following him. I don't think he's in mortal danger at any point whatsoever, although there was this one point earlier. Apart from that, I've watched this several times, and the closest thing to anyone following him is this woman with a baby stroller right here. But to be perfectly fair, she does pop in here again later. Maybe Tim thought that she was in hot pursuit. That's terrifying. Who knows? Maybe he was paranoid that she was going to do this. But I'd say that the chances of that are relatively slim, so we'll call that claim debunked. Claim number 2, people were shouting things. So I've listened to this several times over, and the closest thing that I can hear to anyone yelling anything at him is this. Now, I can see how that might be terrifying. I mean, she's speaking a foreign language. For all he knows, she could be saying, I'm going to take a bus on your forehead and drink out of your skull like a goblet. But there's literally nothing else. I did take the liberty of hiring a dog with ultra-sensitive hearing. Unfortunately, he just sat around with a direction, and due to YouTube's terms of service, I can't show him. But I did ask that direction if he had heard anything.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't hear anything.
Thanks, penis. So there's absolutely no doubt about it. Tim was just lying about this. Debunked! Claim number 3, they were immediately shouting at him when they arrived. So I will admit there is no shortage of shady-looking characters inside this sunlit outdoor shopping mall. Now, there's no footage to corroborate this. It's possible that it did happen off camera. Except I did speak with the segment's camera woman, and she recalls that literally only one thing was shouted, which was, "Who are you with?" And she said it was difficult to even decipher whether that was meant in a threatening tone at all. So yeah, that's kind of debunked. And finally, claim number 4, Tim's totally credible sounding claim that the police believe that at any second,
Maybe if we arrest one of these guys, there could be 50 more in a few minutes with stones.
sure, why not? I mean, if a horde of 50 mass irate refugees were suddenly going to appear, I guess, presumably from their stronghold beneath this outdoor shopping mall, why wouldn't they first grab a stone from their stockpile of rocks? Yeah, super duper believable. Look, we don't have much to go on here. It's not fully debunkable, but I did speak to a few people in law enforcement, and no, this isn't like the dog penis thing. I actually did talk with them. And their reaction to Tim's claim was basically,
Ooh, cringe, hard cringe.
yeah, they don't buy it. Because, bottom line, if the police think you are literally at risk of 50 irate townspeople, I don't know, stoning you to death? Or more specifically, if they genuinely think that you are a threat of death or great bodily harm, they and their department are accountable for any harm that befalls you. And that includes this. The procedure in that situation is they would accompany you far more closely than they did here. If police write an information report or get an incident number, they didn't, and make sure that you have gotten to your car on foot and follow you out of the area. None of these things happened. Now, full disclosure, Tim's associate did say that the police recommended that they stop filming and leave. Probably because not everybody likes to be filmed. But Tim asked for the escort himself. He said so numerous times.
The officer said, if we make an arrest, there could be 50 people here with stones. And so I asked them, will you follow us out?
And, well, I don't doubt that they gave him some kind of extremely informal escort towards his vehicle, but the idea that they genuinely believed he was in great danger, which Tim definitely wants you to believe,
No reason, let's get the hell out of here.
it's just not at all supported by the video and the total lack of standard procedure that's evident within it. And for the record, the police remarked that this happened to be their typical route. Tim was going in the same direction, and this is where they normally park. All this was, in fact, confirmed by a Danish reporter who was living in the area at the time.
In the 4 days I've been in Rinkeby, I've seen the police drive the same route around the city all day long. That's the route Tim Pool happens to be taking. His car is parked at the local school, where police are driving over next door and parking, just like they usually do. It has nothing to do with Tim Pool.
And finally, I just have to mention this Swedish article that I came across that really made things fall into place for me. Tim is, I guess, a war reporter. a war reporter. He's discussed things like nearly being killed in Venezuela and many other supposedly deadly situations many times. Yet, when Tim reaches his car and it doesn't start, this is his immediate reaction.
Wait, the car is not started. But they disable your car? What's wrong with it?
Okay, we really need to unpack that reaction because I think it's incredibly telling. And you know what? Let's steel man all of this. Let's say, for the sake of the argument, that this angry mob with stones in their hand did in fact exist. Masked men were following them, shouting crazy things, all of it. Okay, for this moment to be anything but pure theatrics, we still have to believe that Tim actually thought that they somehow identified his car, which was parked well over a tenth of a mile away. I Google Earth and Google Map this shit, so I know what I'm talking about. That cracked up looking thing, that's the police car. This area right here is where Tim walked through with those crazy quasi-Nazi dudes, and then crossed all the way from here to here to here.
Mas já fizeste o zoom?
Intersection. At this point, we passed
Huh?
well over 200 meters. That's
Não dás o primeiro?
Ah, estás a
we
filmar.
then continued at least another 25 meters.
O gato no amigo mudou agora.
That is the D1 building.
O gato levou agora
O
tudo.
gato.
I presume that these are the refugees.
Espera, vai da frente.
Mas mudou de idade ou dessa? Ou...
They
Não
should
sei.
be waiting and wait and ready to ambush them at any moment because they psychically do not.
Olha lá, já que estás aqui.
Sabotage it.
Queres brinjar obrigado a comer com peixe ou isso? O que é que queres comer com peixe, Guilherme? A salada, mas tu não gostas de comer salada à noite? Não?
Totally legit.
Estás a falar com as coisas e tal.
Please remember
Isso foi
this
jantar.
entire set of lies that we have painstakingly gone through.
Não tens de ter carne, já pensei nisso quando voltar. Quando voltar, se
It
faz
states that Sweden is a stinking cesspool of violence and like rapist or whatever. In the eyes of his fans, that'll make him look heroic. And I want you to take a mental note of that because we're going to circle back to that later. And Cortez, you're totally making me lose my concentration. Never mind. End of part one. But I don't know what to do with those salad round legs. They're calling again.
Consegues ouvir a campainha?
Consigo.
You think
Vais ser já.
the politician is working for the
Podes ser mais tarde.
É pá, tá bem, mas eu quero poder
Weapon
ir para
factory.
casa, descansar, olhar o ar-condicionado,
For these
ver
countries,
qualquer coisa na
you make
televisão.
this war come there.
Eu
You
vou
get the
fazer isso,
resources
começo a
from the
descansar.
country.
Está bem.
The people
Depois
come
vou
here
conseguir seguir.
as a cheap working class people, and everything about this is about harvesting.
Really complex. What some of the activists down there told me is that, and this is more conspiracy, but this gave the perspective of the hard left in Sweden, and their really left was there too, already left, is that Sweden builds weapons. They then sell them, to NATO, to other countries, dictators, and then the United States, we bomb these countries and destroy their communities, and then Sweden welcomes in the refugees as sort of a surplus of their war, a reward. You bring these people in, and they will bolster your economy by creating a cheap workforce. That's what they believe. Right. And even though what you're saying, there's really not a lot of evidence. Of course, not a lot of conspiracy. Yeah.
Quantos fechas isto? Está a porta?
A caixa de cartão. Sim.
So, Tim Pool just really dropping some high level batshit extremist group conspiracy level ideas there on Rubin Report. Well, by the way, while researching this video, I learned some interesting things. For instance, surprisingly, Tim's Sweden series was far from the most awkward and transparently racist expose on the topic. That award goes to Mr. Joey Stockings.
Explosions going on, migrants roaming the streets, people, and hopefully I don't get killed.
Such a brave man. But one of the most surprising things I learned is that this series could have been good. Or actually, scratch that, marginally better. There were unaired interviews, like with this woman, an education administrator from the U.S. living in Sweden, who offered an overall positive view of immigration from an American perspective. Jonathan Lehman, an extremist group expert and journalist with Expo, a highly respected media watchdog group, sort of like the Swedish version of Right Wing Watch. And we're going to talk about him later. And on top of that, it would soon become the anti-immigrant / Islam propaganda tool that it did, and that by the end, Tim was literally canceling interviews altogether with subjects that would subdue that far-right propaganda angle significantly, mostly for interviews with extreme right-wing nutbags. And so, how did all that happen? Well, in great part, it was due to this man, a Swedish journalist by the name of Chang Frick. Now, Chang is the editor for Leader Edog. It specializes in anti-Islamic and anti-immigrant fear porn. And as I mentioned in my previous pool video, it was named in the 2018 Oxford study as one of the top 3 sources of fake news, or junk news, as they call it in Sweden. Did I mention he was the guy at Rickety? Right, they call it consultant. That's not a red flag at all. But the day before the Rickety incident, he discussed with Tim how nearly every night he came across burning vehicles in Stockholm.
In fact, go night crawling, I would say, almost every day.
But then he had a pretty hard time finding many good ones to impress for it.
This was the cheapest, weakest excuse for a car fire. This is just a cheapest excuse for a car fire. Here is another lousy excuse of a car fire.
To his credit, he did finally find one that he and Tim agreed did not suck. Only one, though. But who is Chang Frick? Aside from the guy who I think kind of looks like an Amish version of Nick Cave, well, years ago, he was an active member of the Sweden Democrats, a party with neo-Nazi tendencies.
Neo-Nazi tendencies?
Okay, Tim, that's actually odd wording on my part. I meant to say neo-Nazi ties, but really more like absurdly thick, unbreakable Nazi chains. And this is not disputed, by the way.
The Sweden Democrats were started by people who have Nazi background. Yeah, I must say I'm very read up on this piece too. I've heard a lot of stories. I've come to the claim that the party you're a member of was started by Nazis. I do a bit of reading, or that's true, isn't it? Yeah, they were members of from a Nazi background who were part of starting the festival.
So, yeah, that guy was being pretty charitable in a myriad of ways. The party was actually started in 1988 in large part by this man. Here he is back in the day with his homies. The first chairman was this man, who incidentally was in a band called Commit Suicide. Yes, that is how it's spelled. With instant bass singer Olaf Ekberg. Their song discussed shooting immigrants and sawing off the heads of, okay, you get the idea, highly normal stuff. And sorry to ruin Ace of Base forever for you if they didn't already do that themselves. That was just far too weird not to include. Anyhow, the party quickly gained ground with the fascist side of the skinhead movement in Sweden. But by 2010, and by the way, that's Chang celebrating the party's electoral victories that same year, the Sweden Dems claimed that they had proved themselves that element. Now, is that true? No, of course not. There have been tons of incidents ranging from various low and high-ranking officials making statements like this and doing stuff like this crap right here, and yes, it's all going by way too fast for you to read because I have like 10 times this many in a very cursed folder. Please let me read if you want. They're horrible, and I'm not even willing to post censored versions of a great deal of them because, trust me, it's gross. But just for the news, though, I will mention that this white nationalist Uberdor.
We, the Northern Brothers, we have come to defend what our ancestors have not for us.
Had a violent scandal when it was found out that he was involved in a bodybuilding group with infamous alt-writer the Golden One.
That sounds glorious as fuck.
We're all getting super jacked to fight an impending war against the anti-whites. And this is a video that exists, by the way. I have no shortage of stories just like these of Nazis doing Nazi stuff. They say that they have a zero tolerance policy, but that's a total joke. They kick a bunch out, more come in. It's kind of like an unending game of whack-a-mole or whack-a-Nazi. So I guess now is as good a time as any to let you know that in an unaired segment, Tim actually joined Frick to interview the Swedish Dems, and for all intents and purposes, it turned into a shameless PR stunt for the party and an epic dumpster fire of feckless hack journalism. But before we dumpster fire dive into that, more background is needed on the Swedish Gems and Mr. Frick. So, many of the most vile SD members never get penalized for their actions at all. Like, for instance, in 2012, when a Sweden Dem by the name of Ken Ekeroth was involved in an incident known as the Iron Pipe Scandal, where he drunkenly chased a Middle Eastern comedian with scaffolding poles while shouting a string of Invito's horrible slurs your imagination could possibly devise, and he continued nonetheless to serve until 2018, all the while publishing numerous articles with titles like this on his blog. And coincidentally, this is the same man who registered the domain name of Chang Frick's website, Neither Edom. And it was later revealed that Chang had secretly received funding from the party and had private discussions with the Swedish Dems, promising to give the party overall favorable coverage and not say anything damaging. Although Chang claims the payment isn't related. So I thrown this term around a great deal during this segment, but I think it's an important distinction to make that for the most part, the party has shifted its early emphasis of anti-Semitism to anti-immigration and Muslims. And case in point is this actual campaign commercial from the party.
Den 19 september kan du välja invandringsbroms före pensionsbroms och rösta på Sverigedemokraterna.
Holy crap! I did not know that you could do that. I did not know that you could be that transparently super crazy racist in a campaign commercial, but I guess I'm just naive. So, the man who has been at the heart of this party for well over a decade, and also the subject of a shameless softball interview by Chang with Tim, is this man, Jimmy Ackison. And here are a few choice quotes from him.
Islam is the Nazism and communism of our time and must be approached with the same disgust and stronger resistance.
And also,
Islam is the biggest danger in Europe and it's going to kill us all.
So that brings us back to Tim, who originally was supposed to spend just a half a day with Chang. That turned into 2 days, and during that time, Chang threw together this unaired last-minute meeting with the Swedish Dems, featuring an interview with Ackison. Now, the fact that this ever happened in the first place is like trying to find secret messages in your soup level crazy. Tim literally didn't do anything. He handed the entire interview over to Chang. It's all in Swedish. It was never translated to Tim, so he could at least ask follow-up questions. Do you guys get why that's really weird and horrible? You don't hand your journalism over to some other guy to do, especially this particular guy in this particular situation. And according to Emily Bali, he didn't even so much as hand a single question over for Chang to ask before the interview started either. Perhaps asking him why he joined the party while it was still primarily run by Nazis and lied about it would have been a good place to start. But that would have required the most basic research on Tim's part, research that I still don't think he's done.
The Sweden Democrats, which they call far right in their eyes, I don't know very much about. I don't know a whole lot about what's going on.
He definitely didn't do any on Chang Frick. I hadn't learned that he had once held office for the Sweden Dems, or that he was asked to start Neither Edom by Ken Ekeroth, or that he worked for yet another news site I didn't even tell you about, which, yes, was also funded by Ekeroth while he held office, contrary to previous statements with the Sweden Dems. According to Tim, these were just facts that he didn't know. All this information was a quick Google search away, but in his defense, that would have required him to do, the most elementary level of journalism a human being has ever performed. So we can let him go on that one. Now, I did have it translated, so you might be wondering what horrifically racist and outrageously Islamophobic stuff was said in this meeting. Well, the answer is nothing. But that was the point. This was a product that was calculated to be harmless and easily digestible to an American audience. Propaganda. It didn't have to be. If you did something, anything, maybe one semi-tough question like, hey, why do you guys refer to Muslims as invaders in your fucking campaign commercials? But no, Tim just sat back while this shady journalist, whose job it basically was to create situation reaches such a complex level of embarrassing stupidity that it almost horseshoes into being brilliant. Chang did everything. He read the entire show. I tend not to use this word a lot because I'm not that crazy about it. There's just no way around it. Tim was nothing short of journalistically cocktail. I don't know how else to describe it. Not long after this, Tim would go on to interview this man, Ola Sandsteak, about alternative media, a man who Chen would go on to publish this book with the following year. His next video after that would be his interview with the Holocaust 9 extremist conspiracy theory dorks whose ideas he later echoed on the Living Report. Considering that Chen clearly did all the work and pulled all the strings to make this happen, who knows? Is it really that crazy to think he might have been responsible for one or both of those interviews as well? I mean,
Even though what you're saying is there's really not a lot of evidence. Of course not, that's a conspiracy.
Yeah. So the very same day, Tim's embarrassingly uneventful Ricky incident occurs, which, of course, was somehow spun by right-wing and extremist media into a harrowing brush with death. Tim shot an unaired interview with this man, Jonathan Lehman, which, according to my sources, he had to be practically dragged to in order to conduct. And that's not really hard to believe, considering how super-duper psyched and totally engaged Tim appears to be. Honestly, I could devote an entire video to this conversation. Lehman, again, is a hate group and extremism expert who really knows his shit, and it's just kind of a thing of beauty to see him one by one deconstruct and politely tear apart narratives that Tim has been weaving throughout not just his Sweden series, but throughout his entire career. So, some straying observations before we really dive into things. Tim makes an aside right here.
He was a lot more conservative. He was me.
Kudos to Tim. He dodged a major bullet there, by not posting it at all. Also, interestingly enough, Tim refers to noted journalist Paul Joseph Watson correctly here.
I'm here because we're on the far right on the challenge.
And I find that notable because, well, follow me here. The term far right is basically synonymous with extremism, and Paul and Tim actually complained about this happening.
I said that Paul Joseph Watson is a right-wing Trump supporter, but in the translations they added the word extremist in the subtitles.
So they put up the word extremist, that you described me as right-wing. That was completely fraudulent.
So either Tim said the quiet part out loud there, or he needs to brush up on his political descriptors. Hopefully Paul can take that up with Tim in the near future when he's not tweeting beans on toast on the lips. And finally, in this segment where Lehman discusses the exceptionally anti-Semitic Holocaust-denying figure Ingrid Carlquist.
And ultimately wrong because of the cooperation with Nazis. And Nazis are very proud of having sort of turned them.
And then Tim lets this.
You better have people find this in the interviewer.
Tons. I think that might say a lot about who was probably influencing Tim while he was out there. Makes sense, because, she's a fan. Anyhow, for brevity's sake, there's a great deal that we can't review, but let's explore a few juicier topics that they discussed. So, Tim starts out this interview with this extremely loaded question.
There's many regulars from supporters saying refugees or immigrants are creating this kind of it. Is that true? Is there some kind of immigrant primary happening in Sweden?
This debate about Sweden, I would say, is it's a bit like the 9/11 truth movement and things like this, and myths about 9/11. That's been exported to the rest of the world. And I would say these descriptions of Sweden having years ago, that's an export from the Swedish far right.
Jim is, of course, undeniably 100% correct there, and I really wanted to point this out because Tim clearly played a part in packaging and exploring this myth of the Swedish far right. I'd like to remind you again of the Brookings Institute essay citing Tim for doing so. The Institute of Global Affairs study as well, which cites far-right actors like Paul Joseph Watson specifically, and right here.
It was challenged by Infowars. What do you think this is?
It fits their agenda. You know, when I went to
What do you think their agenda is?
their agenda is to make people scared of immigration and refugees.
So a bit later in a discussion on the rise of far-right media, John gives us this insight.
If you look at the stuff they do, that's actually taken from mainstream media. Many of these websites are not news outlets. They'll just collect news from these organizations and then have the like, this is how you should understand this.
And that is just simply amazing, because it's not only true, Tim would go on to do that for a career. Seriously, nobody does that more than Tim.
Whatever.
You know, it's almost as if Tim thought about what John said here and thought, hey, that sounds like a pretty good model to base my career on. But yeah, that's what Tim does for a living. Reads mainstream media articles and tells you how to feel about them.
And now you've got this family, saying they weren't fighting over a chicken sandwich, man. These people are hypocrites, and they're disgusting.
It's all been analyzed. 8 out of 10 are deep mainstream sources, the exceptions being Breitbart and Andy No tweets. Speaking of Andy No,
In the U.S., there's been several high-profile instances where people think in a hate attack, and these stories are highlighted by these right-wing sites and media outlets as proof that these are fake hate crimes. We have these stories from both sides, and of course, that these things are used as propaganda, saying that, well, it wasn't true this time, and then understood is then it's not true in all these other instances as well. And I think that's a type of propaganda that's been around for a long time.
indeed it is. And Tim creates it. He's made 38 videos. I counted them. There's no duplicates here on just the Justice Smollett case alone. So contrast that with just one video he made on the white supremacy motivated Christchurch shooting, a video in which he claims to have read the shooter's manifesto,
And also look through his manifesto.
title replacement, yet somehow didn't know what that was afterwards. One video on Christchurch and 2 videos on the El Paso shooting. All 3 used to propagate his incessant warnings of civil war.
We're in a civil war. We are in it.
Safety crimes are just a fixture on this channel. There isn't actual hate crimes. Although Tim does love to point to conflict cases, and they painted a person's face, a bit of dog. No, I'm sorry, another dog accused of a racist crime. All in all, it's pretty hard to make the case that Tim takes the crime seriously, and very easy to think that his videos would provoke one to say,
Well, it wasn't true this time, then it's not true in all these other instances as well.
by the way, John did explain the Nazi roots of the Sweden guns to Tim.
These Democrats have roots in practicing the Nazis, and they actually have those roots. They were founded by people who were veterans in this group, this sort of like actually see.
He also mentioned the current dubious ties, as well as just how far right they still were, making Tim's lack of providing Chang with any questions whatsoever all the more journalistically irresponsible, which is honestly something I didn't even think was possible, and rendering bizarro statements like this.
The Swedish Democrats are considered the far right, the alt-right of Sweden, but they are further left than the American left, which is hilarious.
By the way, I have 2 other examples of him saying pretty much the same exact thing as that, and they're all either excessively dishonest or just superhumanly stupid. One of the 2, or perhaps both, probably both. Now, this one is kind of sneaky. Once again, while discussing the rise of far-right media, Tim says this.
The rise of these sites at least has something to do with the media's ineffectiveness in communicating because these groups were not seeking out the alternative. Would you agree with that, or would you? I would say that that's actually primarily a strategy from our extremists. Remember, there are people who are upset with reporting, but there are people who are upset with the reporting of mainstream media for many reasons. With this surge of people saying that media cannot trust the media is lying about this stuff, that is actually primarily a very ideological and political critique, which comes from a very clear perspective.
So if there's one thing that Tim and his audience loves, it's a good scapegoat. Another example would be how after Charlottesville, he pretty much blamed the SKW
when you have media organizations that are absolutely okay with shitting on people for being men or shitting on people for being white, you're making the far right recruit much more easily as well.
So right here, he's essentially blaming the rise of Swedish xenophobes, Islamophobes, and neo-Nazis on the media not speaking to them. Neo-Nazis? Okay, so hear me out here. Instead of the scapegoat with 10 factions from the SJWs and media creating those that hate, maybe these people are hateful because many deeply insecure people and or those who are thoroughly dissatisfied with their own lives tend to need and develop hate-based scapegoats. Basic psychology. But anyhow, that's not why it's super sneaky. No. Days after having this conversation, Tim would later use this explanation twice within his Sweden series.
All of this is just making more people feel distrustful of the establishment. It's making the far-right party, the Sweden Democrats, grow every single year.
And amazingly, one of those times was literally in response to a journalist who was criticizing his journalism.
And what do you think is going to happen when the average person is sick and tired of reading a story about the journalists instead of reading a story about the issues their country is facing? It's going to drive them to alternative media websites and then subsequently far conservative parties.
He's literally saying, hey, go ahead and talk about how irresponsibly critical my journalism is, but you're going to create some Nazis. And you know what? That's not the only time he does that in the video. So that's a total of 2 times within that video and 3 times altogether. So just unreal, dude. Tim, what are you? You know, throughout his Sweden series, Tim gets the impression that there's an element of fear in the air due to repressive hate speech laws, that the press just can't truly express themselves, and free speech is under attack. And since his trip, he's been a little melodramatic about it.
I've talked with people who have visited Sweden on vacation, and you can tell me it's the North Korea of the North.
Okay, maybe I added that last part to Mike Cernovich's documentary hoax, but anyhow, all of this manifests into this question.
Right? In the United States, the Center for Speech is that you can't set facts correct. But according to the law in Sweden, even expressing the can be a crime where you can prison up to 2 years. So it actually takes quite a lot for people to get. They have to be quite close to what is legal in the United States. The tradition of how the law is interpreted shows that it's actually not so easy to just express contempt.
Yep, it's all true. Sweden does have some of the most lax speech laws in all of Europe. In some regards, yes, U.S. laws are less restrictive, but there's various metrics to assessing overall freedom of expression. And, well, Sweden does rank number 3 in the 2020 World Press Freedom Index, while the U.S. is number 44. Hey, we beat Tonga! Ludicrous notions that Sweden is some kind of tyrannical free speech hellhole isn't just an ignorant lie. It furthers Finn's overall project of sealing his followers into a political and informational bubble. That's what's a tickler of free speech. It's compelling their speech with malice, speech manipulations, no less. But Tim is fighting to say
that's a line in the movie they thought was appropriate to come out right now. Hold the movie. Seriously, I mean, look, man, I'm not saying the movie should be pulled necessarily.
So remain inside the warm, gooey goodness of Tim's bubble, because the man is a free speech martyr. I mean, as Cernovich's documentary hoax also notes, which isn't really the case. He was just blocked on Twitter for 1 week by the official Twitter account.
What is this?
That particular curator used Blocklist to block a bunch of people, but next week's curator just unblocked them all and tweeted this out. So Tim's maybe being a tad melodramatic here. And by the way, Tim also obtained this information from Chuck Crick, because, of course, well, I think he did because it allowed Cernovich's hoax, a documentary on media lies featuring paragons of truth like Stephen Molyneux, James O'Keefe, and Alex Jones, to continue to leave this myth of Tim being some sort of free speech hero. And speaking of Cernovich,
one of the higher profile supporters, and like Cernovich, I'm sure you're familiar with that all. He said that the Trump supporters are going to be
they actually really trying to encourage the racists out of
Yes. And I had to point this out because, well, the individual Tim primarily is referred to here that was purged by Cernovich is Capitol Hill insurrectionist and alt-right rapper dork, Big Alaska. And just a couple months after his discussion here, Tim asked Big Alaska this extremely hard-hitting question.
So let's cut to the chase and go straight for the political accusations. Yeah. Are the people coming here Nazis?
No. Absolutely.
White nationalists?
I'm not aware of that.
No follow-up to that question. Come on, Tim. Please, just don't hit him too hard with the journalism. For the love of God! And finally, possibly my favorite scapegoat / false equivalency in the entire interview with Tim. And really just try and follow him here because, well, I just think this is kind of nuts.
We had things like the hashtag yes on that, right, where feminists specifically said, they made this full reference to the bowling skills, and one of them was pointing to the hashtag yes on that, and also the hashtag kill on that. So they certainly do target that as a whole group because of this. So people seem to be intolerant.
Okay, yeah, that argument got so weird that it fucked the camera up. I googled the poison Skittles thing because that was just like, what? But funny enough, all I could find was a horribly cool Donald Trump Jr. tweet about poison Skittles in reference to Syrian refugees. But never mind. Did you understand where he was going with that? At the end of Tim's creative little Skittles aneurysm, he says, so people seem to be intolerant because. And what he's basically saying there, and I will steal that, kind of, is that one of the reasons we see people becoming increasingly intolerant is because of things like this cringy hashtag that probably mostly antsy teenage girls are tweeting a lot. I noted it, that's what it means. But fortunately, Neiman gets to the heart of and neutralizes Tim's very, very, very confusing and sad hashtag kill all men with the poison Skittles is creating intolerance, and somehow that's all a very important argument quite well here.
But people seem to be intolerant. I think also that was a type of propaganda that's sort of makes it stop, but it's not to make clear to an actual political agenda to get rid of men in the United States. Whereas this anti-Muslim positions, that's connected to an idea that seeking the purge of these people. So I think, I don't think they look at it.
Yeah, of course they do. And first of all, yes, this was a frequent topic with Tim's.
A blue check type of feminists. And they say things like hashtag kill all men. You actually have feminists saying things like hashtag kill all men. Women use the hashtag kill all men. Yes, this is pervasive.
It's just kind of a common reactionary false equivalency designed to assign false blame, to be honest. It's essentially the same tactic we saw in the Charlottesville clip earlier, and that we can see on display right here.
For me, seeing all these men walk around with TV torches, it really shouldn't be surprising to the media and left and all these people shocked. White men are kind of angry right now. It's everything telling you white men suck, white men suck. So it's kind of like, you really didn't expect this.
Yeah, I guess MTV made a cringy video, and we have this kind of cringy hashtag. So you really didn't expect this? Really? Yeah. Pretty much the exact same tactic. But as Lehman notes, there's just no genuine political mechanisms in place to purge, replace, or displace straight white men. There are with American immigrants and with Muslims in Europe, and arguably America too. So the two simply do not compare. And unless Tim's beanie acts as some sort of information repellent, through this conversation, we should know that. But yeah, all in all, it's obvious why he never posted this. It's embarrassing. It made him look horrible by virtue of the fact that it conflicted with so many of the narratives and tactics he utilized throughout the Sweden series and continues to employ to this day. The series itself is his most significant early showcase of his willingness to platform what would one day become a long line of political extremists, neo-fascists, crackpot QAnon, Pizzagate, and 9/11 conspiracy theories, stop the stealers, all-out grifters, anti-vaxxers, and just plain cranks with little to zero pushback whatsoever. A practice that has worked out quite well for him, to be honest. I mean, it would, in great part, one day allow him to purchase his glorious skateboard park compound slash mansion where he's sent to stockpile guns and has on occasion used it to harbor kidnapped cats. Yeah. Anyhow, the Lehman interview is a fascinating early look under the beanie and straight into the brain of Tim. And if that disembodied brain could somehow talk, I think I know what it might say.
Welcome to Garbage World.
So, hey everybody, this is a little unusual, I guess, but first I want to say that this video is dedicated to Laura Thornhill, a longtime patron and supporter of the channel. Although we never met, I wish we did. She was just exceedingly kind and just super fun to talk to over the years. And my heart both goes out to her family and her twin sister Lee. So we're just gonna pour one out for my homie. There we go. So, closing thoughts. 1. Make no mistake, this was the series that truly launched Tim's YouTube career. And you can hear him acknowledging as much right here.
I've always produced videos on my YouTube channel, but it became a real consistent thing with Sweden.
2. Don't give Tim any credit whatsoever for not posting the Sweden Democrats footage. He had every intention of doing so.
We still have many more interviews from Sweden that we make for that soon. It's just an issue of translation.
I know for a fact that was the only untranslated footage they ever shot, so yeah. 3. This is slightly unrelated, but oh boy, it's worth it. So in the last video, I demonstrated that Tim's perpetual claim that
I've heard for a while that
it, which helps him get an info, left-wing centrist credit, probably just isn't true in light of the fact that he revealed in a little-known 2011 interview that he hadn't voted for Obama in 2008. He actually voted for Ron Paul. Wow! And I want to just kind of poke a big hole into another one of his running probable lies. If you've ever watched him, chances are you know that he loves telling everyone how he supposedly grew up in the crime-ridden streets of Southside Chicago.
I grew up on the South Side of Chicago. I'm from the South Side, man. I grew up on the South Side. I grew up on the South Side of Chicago. I grew up on the South Side of Chicago. I've watched people do drugs. You know what happens on the South Side when you challenge their honor? If they get out with a gun, coming with guns. And sometimes they just didn't. One dude in my neighborhood was made to kill people when he was a teenager. So the guy just went, pulled out a gun and went, pop, pop. That's Chicago.
So unpacking the various motivations and many dishonest narratives that I think are at play here, that Tim gets to spin by constantly reminding his viewers of this, well, that would be a video unto itself. But again, I did have several former co-workers of Tim's contact me, and when he provided me with this very interesting bit of insight right here.
Tim's whole South Side shit comes up like that. He didn't even live in the neighborhood that was the famous of the Southeast side of Chicago. When he talks about Chicago,
I mensagem ajuda, né? No podcast. Eu só disseste os vídeos.
Ele acabou tipo uma coisa assim. Eu também já estava quase sem. Já estava quase sem comida.
Eu quando vi à tarde eu tinha uns. Ok. Mas gosto.
Now, some final thoughts in just a moment. But first, if you guys enjoyed this video, please do this, and this. That's all fantastic. And if you really enjoyed it and you'd like to support a creator who honestly is trying his best to get content out while dealing with a bit of health stuff, more on that in this video right here if you'd like. You can be super duper awesome and consider becoming a patron. You'll get updates, soundtracks, deleted scenes, and outtakes of this video, and more. Or make a one-time donation on PayPal. You get t-shirts,
Parece que existe um labirinto ou isso. Olha, pede já a maquiadora, se ela não tem uma cola para isso. Não, uma cola tipo de maquiagem que dá para tirar. Há coisas mesmo de maquiagem que é tipo. Não é aquelas que tens que usar uma cena de 2 componentes para tirar, mas.
So to counter that, it would be incredibly helpful if you consider following me here on Twitter. And not just like, but retweet and comment on my feed, which features the video. Tim is just one of the largest political YouTubers and literally liars on this platform. And I put as much blood, sweat, editing, and research years into this as I did because, well, I need smart people to know about all of this. Oh, and check out Tim Pool Uploads the Lost Tim Pool Dates because that's a banger too. Hey Tim, this is for you. So, brief overview. In various videos now, I've shed light on how you help push a bogus news site that was in fact run by the Nazi cult. With barely seen footage that you deleted years ago, I demonstrated how you egregiously lied about not pushing separate conspiracy theories, which you did numerous times on multiple platforms, then threatened to sue journalists for stating the truth about it, and that you were successful in that, I might add, and that you were loving it. I republished long deleted footage of you saying all sorts of just bizarrely unfortunate things, like this, for instance.
What I will say about Richard Spencer is that
Mas ela depois ajuda mais depois.
when you meet him and talk to him, that's
Sim, mas há de haver umas costas solventes e tal.
Mas eu andava a começar a procura de orelhas destas.
E isso já está pensado que concordo. Vou tentar construir.
Sim, depois faz.
Bonkers conspiracies on the Lumen report long after knowing exactly who they were. I thoroughly debunked the primary lies behind the very incident that more than anything jump-started your YouTube career. The article on how you kidnapped that cat, my paws were all over it. Yep, it was me that tipped off Will Summer, and yes, he said I could post this DM to brag about it. And now I'm doing it! Nearly 3 paragraphs of the devastating recent Daily Beast article by Robert Silverman contained information found in this video. I revealed how you gave your camera over to a man who has been paid by fascists to create fascist propaganda for those fascists at a Swedish fascist convention. And then mix the interview where you were specifically told that they were fascists and ex-fucking Nazis. And you know what? That is all a very incomplete overview. Tim,
Então,
I'm just some random
Thanks,
idiot
Pastor.
on the internet. I'm the cat guy. Hey, it's me, random idiot cat guy. That's probably going to be on my gravestone. And yet, it's undeniable. I have out-journalized you. That's right, I've out-journalized your entire career, which granted is a really, really low bar. God damn it, Tim. Look me in the eyes.
Oh no, what a fucking nightmare.
You've been in the game over 10 years, and you've been out-journalized by the cat guy. And you know what? It feels good. Don't try this at home, kids. I'm literally a professional. Who's your daddy, Tim? Who's your daddy?
everything I told you will be wrong and completely meaningless. So keep that in mind.
Então, rapaz, não, preciso de machado para casar, pá. Como é que uma pessoa casa? co- Como é que uma pessoa casa sem machado? Está já segunda-feira? Ok, eu vou. Guarda, eu não sei como. É que eu não estou a ver como. Certo. Sim, então, sim. Talvez dê para fazer. Eu é assim, eu segunda-feira tenho que arriscar o Rocha a montar uma exposição. Depois também tenho que ir tratar de umas coisas na Galeria António Prates, que tem uma exposição também. Mas a Galeria António Prates fecha sempre às 6 da tarde. Se eu for terça ou quarta às 6 da tarde, dá para a gente se encontrar aqui por aí. Sim. Tu costumas ter estado aí? Tens estado aí, não tens? Ou não? Não, não é isso que eu estou a dizer. Não é fora. Depois combinámos para terça ou quarta, também não te vai atrapalhar, pois não? Ah, ok, é isso. Ok, certo. Então, em princípio, terça. Mas depois falamos, mas pronto. Próximo. Ah, sim, sim, sim. Sim, opá, estou a acabar ainda coisas para a exposição de António Prates e tal, é um bocado estressante, mas que não está a andar bem. Tá. Vou fazer os estandartes e tal, que ainda só vou fazer agora, esta semana. É, os estandartes, desenhos simples, também faço rápido. E umas gelas, assim, é que eu já gostava de ter feito antes, mas estou super ocupado ainda a acabar. É uma cena. Tipo quê? Ah, não, nós vamos pôr em garrafas e derretê-las, estás a ver? Tipo, à antiga, tipo, como se tivesse muitos anos de derreter. Vou derreter tipo com uma chaleira, uma coisa assim, depois uma chaleira de metal, derreter a coisa para verter, para ser mais rápido. Está fixe. Então vai, eu também amanhã, como estou a trabalhar, é mais complicado, mas depois assim que eu souber como vou meter. Sim, ficamos assim, ficamos então para terça. Está fixe. Vá, abraço, vá.
Well, everyone, today, September 4th, 2021, is a big day. One that I know many of you are very excited about. That's right, it's Beyonce's 40th birthday. Now, it just so happens to also be my 40th birthday. Yes, it turns out that Beyonce and I were born on the exact same day. And you probably didn't know this, but we have a lot in common. We both only go by one name, which starts with a B, is 7 letters long, and shares more than 50% of the same letters. We both have created iconic songs about being single. We both have videos with millions of views. I guess as an entertainer can be a little scary. Ask almost every rapper, maybe a small handful of them manage to keep their careers going after 40, but most of them become irrelevant after they reach the big 4-0. Pop stars don't fare much better. Most of them drop off by the time they hit 35. Gwen Stefani, Christina Aguilera, and Pink have all put out songs in the last few years that haven't even come close to capturing a shred of the former glory that they once had. But comedians, oh man, George Carlin got his first HBO special when he was 40. He got movie roles in sitcoms after that and became successful across multiple generations. Now he's still selling out venues up until his death at the age of 71. Louis Black also got his first stand-up special when he was 40. He would get appearances on The Daily Show and won a Grammy for Best Comedy Album when he was 49. Bill Burr also did his first stand-up special when he was 40. Dude went on to be on Breaking Bad, The Mandalorian, is one of the most popular podcasts ever, his own animated show on Netflix. He almost definitely made the bulk of his money after he turned 40. Louis C.K.? Well, we won't mention that guy, but still, all of this gives me hope that maybe my best days as a guy who tries to make people laugh on the internet are still ahead of me. That maybe the lesson here is that a little life experience goes a long way to being able to entertain people. Oh, and also another lesson, maybe just don't stand between women in a closed door while you've got your dick in your hand. That's also a pretty good rule of thumb. Now, if you've watched this far, you're probably wondering, hey, cuckly, you puppet, it's Saturday. I don't give a shit about your birthday, or Beyonce's birthday, or your midlife crisis and sad attempt to convince yourself that you're not a washed-up old piece of shit. Where's a regular video? Where are you on camera and not hiding under a bridge like we prefer? Entertain me, clown! Well, don't worry. You're still going to get your regular video. Try something a little bit different after the lower performance of videos around the holidays. Since this is the unofficial last weekend of summer, I figured that a lot of people are going to be wanting to spend their last days outside and maybe not staring at screens or at this. So, this week, I'm going to put out a brand new musical autopsy on Tuesday. What better way to begin my 40s than with a video complaining about the music made for people 20 to 25 years younger than me. Then I'm going to return to my regular Saturday schedule on the 11th with an all-new dose about how YouTube has started point-blank telling creators to their face that they're going to be making more money off of their videos and shorts and not give them a cent in return. Have a great long weekend, and I'm looking forward to making another video like this in 10 years when Beyonce still looks 30 and I look like death pissed all over my face and left me to rot in a Burger King dumpster.
Again. So today we're going to talk about planes, trains, and automobiles. Trolleys, I guess. We're going to talk about the last operation before the United States withdrew and how there are many, many lessons in it. You know, for the last couple of weeks, we've heard a whole bunch of people talk about what they would have done with perfect hindsight. If they were in charge, well, it would be different. So today I'm going to provide you with a scenario, and you get to make the call. Everybody wants to be a cat until it's time to do cat stuff. So here's the scenario. There's a car packed with a whole bunch of boom, and it's headed to the airport. If you do nothing, a whole bunch of people are going to be lost, just like before. And see, you have the power. You can make that call. You can strike it. But if you do, odds are there will be loss of innocence. That's the scenario, and that is what happened. A family was taken out. Somebody had to make that call. You know, when we talk about this kind of stuff back here, it's black and white, especially if you're on some news set somewhere. But when you're out there, it gets real gray real quick. That scenario, it's almost identical to an ethical dilemma that has been debated for a long time. You can put your answer down below because you can look at it from the utility standpoint, right? Just numbers, pure math. You do the strike, it's going to be less gone. And you can look at it that way. Or you can look at it from a moral standpoint and say, you know, right now, we're not really responsible because we didn't actively engage in the harm that was occurring. But if we intervene, well, then we do share some of the responsibility. It will be debated just like the trolley car problem. If you're not familiar with it, you have certainly seen the meme somewhere on social media. Little guy standing at a switch, runaway trolley car. On the track that it's on, there are 4 people tied to it. There's a side track that has 1 person. You can flip that switch and send it over to that 1 person. What do you do? It has been debated a very, very, very long time. And somebody had to make that call. And they will second guess themselves for the rest of their life. But that stuff becomes real clear back here with the benefit of hindsight. Now, one thing I want to make really clear about this is that this is a very specific incident. Most times, the United States engages in these kinds of strikes. It is not that imminent. It is not a situation like this. What happened here is not a good rebuttal to any criticism of how the United States has used this tool over the last 20 years. This is an outlier. It's normally not like this. Normally, there is the opportunity to wait. It doesn't have to be decided at that exact moment. Just want to be real clear on that. But if you take this and you widen it, right, and you know you're no longer talking about the trolley car being just the car headed to the airport, but the trolley car is the problem, right? What is the problem? What is the runaway train? It's the intervention. It's the war. And every time one of these little runaway trolley cars gets moving, there are tons of people willing to tie civilians to the tracks. And somebody has to try to avoid them, decide which switches to flip. The only way to avoid this scenario is to make sure that the trolley car doesn't start to be a runaway trolley car. That's the only way you stop it. But that's not the lesson that we learned. You can tell that from the commentary. Because the commentary is, oh, if my guy was in power, if my political party was in power, oh, it would be different. No, it wouldn't. Both major parties in the United States held a pretty similar amount of time overseeing this campaign. There weren't major differences. A lesson that is being taught by Afghanistan is not being learned. Nobody's listening to what it's saying. These types of conflicts will continue until we learn the lesson, and they will have the same outcome. Because it's pretty much always the same. The people tied to the tracks, they don't own the tracks and they don't own the trolley car. They're just caught in the middle. Somebody's global turf war. But when we analyze it, we pretend that we care about it, but not enough to change how we do things. we're still going to allow that trolley car to run away the next time some charismatic politician waves the flag and talks about imminent danger. Anyway, it's just a thought. Have a good day. Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today, we're going to talk about tattoos and what they can teach us about that law in Texas, that new law. Because I got a message that is pretty entertaining. I'm sure you're going to get a bunch of people asking you to talk about the new law in Texas. That's true. I did. And I'm sure that if you do it, it's just going to be a rehash of all of the other times you've covered this topic. That's also true. Really would be. My views on this haven't changed. So instead of that, can you answer a question? I know that you're on the choice side, but why then do you have so many kids? I actually get this question way more than you would think, but the easy answer here, the easy out, is that we made the other choice on the choice side. But that's the easy answer. That's the easy out here. It doesn't address the actual sentiment that causes this question. There's a base belief among a lot of people that's just however you run your life is how you feel society as a whole should be run, and that you should support the state legislating it that way. That's just all wrong. That's just all wrong. I don't like visible tattoos. I don't have any. I'm wearing a shirt and shorts. You don't see any tattoos on me. My wife, she has a visible tattoo because she has bodily autonomy. So let's say I decide I'm going to try to take that away because I want to enforce my viewpoint on the entire society using the power and violence of the state. So I lobby legislators to pass a law saying in the state of Florida you can't have a visible tattoo. You can't tattoo somebody if it's in a visible location. Okay? What happens? The same thing that always happens when you try to legislate morality. When you try to legislate things like this, whether it be prohibition, whether it be this debate, whether it be the war on drugs, anything, the same thing always happens. Nothing. Not really. It doesn't stop whatever the behavior is that the legislation is supposed to end. It doesn't stop that behavior. That behavior continues. In this case, let's take the tattoo case. What happens if you're middle class? You have a little bit of means, right? So when you go on vacation, you get your tattoo. You cross state lines, do it somewhere else. That's what happens. Middle and upper middle class. If you're really wealthy, well, you just hire an artist to come to you, do it in the privacy of your own home. Nobody has to know. Or if you're poor, what happens then? More than likely, there's going to be people who are trying to fill that black market Now, they may not be as good, they may not be as safe, but they'll provide that service. And then you end up actually making the whole thing worse. You make it less safe. Because they don't have the money, they don't have those power coupons that can exempt them from the law. And they don't have the means to get out. So, like many times when people try to legislate morality, what actually ends up happening is it's just another way to kick down those who are in the right classes. Well, they're exempt from it. They can find a way around it. It's not a big deal. But those on the bottom, when they get busted, oh, they're horrible people. It's the same thing that's going to happen here. It's the same thing that's going to happen here. So what's going to happen in Texas with this new law? It is mainly going to impact people of low income because they can't get around it. But it's not actually going to stop the behavior. It's just going to make it less safe. It seems like a weird legislative priority. But then again, it's not actually a legislative priority. The goal here with this legislation is not to end this behavior. It's not to stop it. They know it won't. It's about taking a bunch of judgmental people and giving them somebody to judge. Because if you're looking down, well, you're not paying attention to what the people above you are doing. And that's what this is about. It's going to be pretty restrictive for lower income people. Middle class, wealthy people, not so much. They'll find a way around it. So as is typically the case, these laws that are trying to legislate morality like this, they end up targeting those people and impacting those people who don't have money and therefore don't have a voice and therefore can't swing an election. Because there's that desire to judge people, to look down on people. And politicians know they can lean into that anytime their policies fail. And that's what's happening in Texas. There are a whole bunch of things going on in Texas that are way more important than this. But then again, this isn't designed to be effective. It's designed to create scandal and give you somebody to look down on. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
Your donations will give hungry children around the world a chance to achieve their dreams. Share a meal with children in need.
The Taliban have regained control in Afghanistan amid a chaotic U.S. evacuation, bringing a tragic end to a 20-year bipartisan foreign policy disaster that American officials of both parties bear responsibility for, and which they've repeatedly lied about. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. The crushing reality of the so-called global war on terror is that some of the highest-ranking officials involved in it now admit that it was a colossal failure, and that's a reality we should all grapple with. Presidents, politicians, and foreign policy elites of both parties deserve blame for this calamity. In his new book, Reign of Terror, author Spencer Ackerman writes, in 2020, I asked Stanley McChrystal, the former Joint Special Operations Command and Afghanistan War Commander, is the war on terror been worth it? It would be impossible to argue that it was, he answered. The outcome just hasn't been positive enough to argue that. That's not an anti-war activist saying that. That's the former commander of the war in Afghanistan saying the 20-year war on terror was a failure. It's like if Kevin Feige said, honestly, I have no idea what's going on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. None of it makes sense to me. I mean, they all have superpowers, but every fight comes down to karate. What the hell, right? Of course, in reality, the only thing Feige has to apologize for is not putting Vince Vaughn and Loki. He missed a huge opportunity to create some buzz and reunite the greatest comic duo since Laurel and Hardy. Buddy, buddy, buddy. And I say that because there are three of you. I'm sorry to reference 2005's Wedding Crashers. That movie's so old, it came out 4 years after the start of the war in Afghanistan. A comment like that from McChrystal, the idea that the so-called war on on Terror has been a 20-year failure should provoke some serious introspection and soul searching on the part of Washington elites, and yet somehow I can't exactly imagine the people responsible for this calamity looking inward and holding themselves accountable for it. George W. Bush is too busy in his art studio trying to, I don't know, get a dog's eyebrow right. So strange that sandwiched between James Patterson's co-author and New England's newest party promoter, we have a former president who's just okay at painting. Also, are the dogs supposed to look like him? I'm not crazy, right? Doesn't it kind of look like the dogs have Bush's face? And that expression of his that says, I don't know the answer to your question? And yet, as tragedy unfolds in Afghanistan, the political world is, of course, engaged in finger-pointing for what has been a generational bipartisan failure that presidents and politicians of both parties bear responsibility for. For example, over the weekend, former Trump Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tried to claim this would not have happened under the previous administration, but got called out by Fox host Chris Wallace.
It looks like the Biden administration has just failed in its execution of its own plan. The plan should have been, much like we had, was that we would have an orderly, conditions-based way to think about how to draw down our forces there. I can assure you, were I still a Secretary of State or the Commander-in-Chief like President Trump, the Taliban would have understood that there were real costs to pay.
You were the first American Secretary of State to ever meet with the Taliban, and you talked about how they had agreed to join us in the fight against terrorism. Do you regret giving the Taliban that legitimacy? Do you regret pressing the Afghan government to release 5,000 prisoners, which they did, some of whom are now back on the battlefield fighting with the Taliban?
Chris, you make peace with your enemies. Chris, we never trusted the Taliban. You can ask them yourselves. We didn't take the word of the Taliban. We watched their actions on the ground when they did the right thing, and they helped us against terror. That was all good. And when they didn't, we crushed them.
All right, first of all, there's literally a picture of you meeting with the Taliban leader the Trump administration had released from prison. That's from November, 9 months ago. It's not some ancient photograph from 30 years ago that we had to unearth by digging through microfiche at the National Archives and then smuggling it out from a rolled-up copy of the Constitution like Nick Cage and National Treasure. Although I would give anything to hear Nick Cage say the word microfiche. There's a secret message written by Benjamin Franklin's ghost that it exists only on microfiche. National Treasure, 3 years after the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. Second, you think the Trump plan would have been more orderly than what's happening now? You guys are the ones who wanted to withdraw by May. I have a hard time believing Trump would have done it in a more orderly way, since nothing he ever did was orderly. He couldn't even withdraw from an umbrella in orderly fashion. Instead of armchair generals engaging in creative political point scoring, what we need right now is everyone calling for the U.S. to accept as many Afghan refugees as possible. That includes Afghans who work with the U.S. Army, but it shouldn't be limited to that. We should welcome anyone who wants to come.
What should the Biden administration be doing for the people of Afghanistan right now?
Every Afghan who is interested in doing so should be given asylum inside the United States. There should be an urgent process. There should be fast-tracked, and the logistics of it can be in part the responsibility of one of the greatest logistical organizations on the planet, which is the United States military, and in particular the United States Air Force. The idea that what the Biden administration is doing is helping get out Afghans who worked for the United States military or served the United States occupation. That is a moral floor that is functioning as a moral ceiling. Working with the United States should not be a condition of acceptance by American refugee admissions people.
That's exactly right. Taking in as many Afghan refugees as want to come here and granting them asylum is the bare minimum we can do, and we should be doing it as fast as possible. And we have the logistical capability to do it. I know it's not the same, but when I got my vaccine at a FEMA site, I was in and out in 20 minutes with a shot in my arm and a CDC card that for some reason doesn't fit my wallet. And I know today probably isn't the right time to plug a product, but I'm excited to announce my wallet, the new awkwardly sized wallet, built specifically to hold your vaccine card. My wallet, order now to receive a free pair of my weird pants. The only pants with pockets big enough to hold my wallet. Anyway, the point is we should be marshaling the same logistical prowess to take in as many Afghan refugees as possible, as quickly as possible. The priority should be getting them out now and worrying about the paperwork later. And yet, for some reason, the process for many Afghans, including those who work at the example, the Atlantic detailed the plight of one interpreter who worked alongside NATO combat units. His first visa application, like those of so many others, was denied on spurious bureaucratic grounds. His second attempt hung in limbo. For years, he tried to track down the human resources department of the military contractor that had employed him, and that subsequently went through several changes of ownership and name. What just let him come here? Screw the paperwork and the red tape. Why are we putting him through a process that's more complicated than trying to switch your Verizon bill to a new address? No, I don't want to upgrade to the triple play package. I just want to move my server. I do not want to add a phone line. I'm just moving. I do not know my account PIN number. No, I do not know my 11-digit billing code. What's my dog's middle name? Hey, what's your middle name? He doesn't know. And those attempting to flee now in the face of the Taliban onslaught are dealing with the same chaos and confusion as NBC reported over the weekend.
We went to a processing center today, a private kind of pop-up office where there was two people with a computer in front of them, and the office was packed with Afghans coming in who were trying to navigate their way through this U.S. State Department's website. All the documentation that they need to provide is in English. They need to be multiple copies, and a lot of the people who were coming in certainly didn't speak English, and because it's not just translators. You have security guards and you have contractors and cleaners. Not all of them speak English and can navigate their way through a website.
Why are we making this so complicated? You need to navigate a government website with multiple copies of your personal records in a packed office with just two people at a computer. So basically, it's the DMV. We just recreated the DMV, and no one should ever have to go through that. Last time I was at the DMV, I waited in line so long, I grew a mustache, and they ended up putting the wrong name on my license. And then my license was too small to fit in my new My Wallet. The tragedy is unfolding now is the culmination of a 2-decade-long legacy of failure left behind by politicians of both parties who repeatedly withheld the truth from the American people. When Bush first announced the invasion of Afghanistan 20 years ago, the goal at the time, according to Bush and the politicians who supported the war, was to retaliate against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban regime that was shielding it and prevent future attacks. And as the war dragged on, Bush continued to insist the U.S. was succeeding in its mission.
I said a long time ago, one of our objectives is to smoke them out and get them running and bring them to justice. We're smoking them out, they're running, and now we're going to bring them to justice.
Remember when the president routinely used the phrase smoke them out like he was in an episode of Branded? And I'm sorry to drop a Branded reference, but sometimes you got to pander to the people who are too old for the mash jokes. Hope you guys liked it! Throughout the war, Bush promised that the U.S. would not repeat the history of failure that had beset past empires in Afghanistan.
The history of military conflict in Afghanistan. It's been one of initial success, followed by long years of floundering and ultimate failure. We're not going to repeat that mistake.
The very thing they told us wouldn't happen is exactly what happened. He sounds like he's describing his own battle with a poncho. We had some initial success, followed by floundering and ultimate failure, but we won't be deterred. Next, we're going to try an umbrella hat. Umbrellas aren't easy either. Just FYI. They knew early in the war that the danger of failure and instability was very real, and behind the scenes, they even admitted they had no idea what to do about it. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld wrote in an internal memo only 6 months after the war started, "We are never going to get the U.S. military out of Afghanistan unless we take care to see that there's something going on that will provide the stability that will be necessary for us to lead. Help," he wrote. He literally wrote the word help with an exclamation point. You know, the same way you text your spouse when you're trapped in a conversation at a dinner party you desperately want to get out of. Rick has been talking about his metal cover band for 20 minutes. They're called Age Against the Machine. Help. The Bush administration kicked off the 20-year bipartisan tradition of lying about the war in Afghanistan and shielding the American people from the truth of what was really happening. We know that from blockbuster reporting in 2019 from the Washington Post, which got its hand on a confidential trove of documents called the Afghanistan Papers, in which senior U.S. officials from both parties admitted they'd been lying about the reality about how the war was really going. For example, a 3-star Army general who served as the White House's Afghan war czar during the Bush and Obama administration said in 2015, "We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan. We didn't know what we were doing. What are we trying to do here? We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking." The U.S. foreign policy apparatus should not approach Afghanistan the same way I approach trying to install a wireless router. Connect the router to a broadband gateway from the United States by inserting an Ethernet cable to the port located on the back of the TV link. I don't have the foggiest notion of what I'm undertaking. Do you know how this works? Why am I asking? And instead of being honest and telling that to the American people, officials cherry-picked and misrepresented the data to make the war look like it was going much better than it actually was. For example, an Army colonel who served as a senior counterinsurgency advisor to U.S. military commanders in 2013 and 14 told government interviewers every data point was altered to present the best picture possible. Surveys, for instance, were totally unreliable but reinforced that everything we were doing was right, and we became a self-licking ice cream cone. What? Is that a thing? A self-licking ice cream cone? That sounds like something that would get pitched on an episode of Shark Tank where everyone laughs, but then Mark Cuban invests, and then 3 years later you hear that it's somehow sold for $1 billion to Apple, and you go to a party and all your friends have self-licking ice cream cones. Try it. It's called the iPhone. It's Siri-enabled. It tracks your steps. The majority of Americans want the forever war in Afghanistan to end. Should have ended a long time ago. Ending it now is the only option. The one thing we can and must do right now is accept as many refugees and grant as many Afghans asylum as we possibly can, as quickly as we can. And if there's anyone left in politics or the media who disagrees, who fearmongers about taking in as many refugees as we can, then when election time comes, I hope voters will smoke them out. That's a bit. Closer look. God's Love We Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV, AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses, and they need your help now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, get vaccinated. We love you.